Hello, how you doing, and welcome back to the channel. So how do we assess England's Six Nations? A little bit of dust has now settled on the championship. The first 5 games of the Steve Borthwick era, that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I'm going to go through the positives and the negatives, and I'm afraid at this moment in time, I think the negatives probably outweigh the positives. But do drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think of England at this moment in time. And also subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. Would always really appreciate it. However many of you are able to do that, it doesn't go underappreciated. But all right, England's Six Nations, how do we assess it? Let's get into it. So let's start off with England's results. 5 games into Steve Borthwick's tenure as head coach, really early days. But those are his results. Obviously, defeat to Scotland on the opening weekend at Twickenham, which was a little bit disappointing. I thought there were positive signs there, but ultimately the game kind of got away from them in the final 20 minutes. They then went and beat Italy. They went and beat Wales in Cardiff. Then the heavy defeat to France, and of course losing to Ireland on the final weekend when Ireland went and won the Grand Slam in Dublin, St. Paddy's weekend, etc, etc. So I think 2 wins from 5 is disappointing. Of course it is from an England perspective. I mean, that's kind of where they were towards with the Eddie Jones era. And I'm going to come back to this when I talk about the negatives. But I think England fans were probably hoping for more progression than they've seen under Steve Borthwick. And there are reasons for that, and I will touch on that in a short while on the video. Let's start with the positives, though, because there are a few. Even though many of you might be feeling disappointed, let's look at it rationally, and there are positives for England. Number 1 is the set piece. Starting with the scrum, England towards the end of Eddie Jones's era were really poor in the set piece, I think, particularly considering it used to be a real strength of English rugby. I think Borthwick is the kind of coach that he wants to get back to that position of it being one of the main areas of the England team. And I think there are steps heading in that direction. They only conceded 3 scrum penalties this Six Nations, whereas they won 14 penalties at the scrum, and 3 of those were against France and 3 of those were against Ireland, who are 2 of the most powerful, best dynamic teams in the world at the moment. So I think the scrum was an area of improvement for England. I thought the line-out was good as well. They did lose a couple of line-outs in a few games, but not loads really. So I think if you look at those 2 things in terms of the line-out and the scrum, there are positive signs there that England are starting to have a more reliable set piece again. If you don't have that, then you're never going to be able to compete in international matches. So I think the return of the set piece is a potentially good thing. Number 2 is discipline for England. And I kind of looked at the penalties they conceded in each of their games. So against Scotland, it was 10 penalties conceded. Against Italy, 7, Wales, 9, France, 11, and Ireland, 13. So it got worse against the better sides, which is no real shock. You're under more pressure. Those fine margins don't necessarily go in your favour as you're trying to get back into the game. So they did concede a few more against the better teams. But I make it that they conceded 50 penalties in the championship, and that's the second best record. So in terms of penalties conceded, England had the second best record in the Six Nations. And again, when I look back at where England were not that long ago, I always felt like they were just leaking penalties. They were just giving teams field position and territory. And I still think it's an area that can improve. I thought particularly that first half against Ireland, there was a number of times where they kind of shot themselves in the foot really with their discipline. It can get better, but again, it's a really important statistic that in my opinion is tracking in the right direction. So discipline's number 2. Number 3 is one man and one man only. You see the picture of him there. It's Ollie Lawrence. How long have England been searching for a traditional crash-bang wallop inside centre? Not worrying about the fitness of Manu Tuolangi, not having a second playmaker there in Owen Farrell, even though previously he has done that role really well, and I still think he could. But Ollie Lawrence came in. I know he missed the final game through injury. And for the most part, I thought he was very good. He was direct, physical. I don't think he got found out defensively, which is what some people's concerns over him were. So the discovery of Ollie Lawrence as an option at 12 for England, for me, is a big thumbs up, and hopefully he returns from injury. I'll get onto kind of depth and squad in a minute, because that actually goes in the negative. How you build that midfield partnership around him is more up in the air. But they have Ollie Lawrence there, and I hope they continue to stick with him going forward into the World Cup and into the World Cup warm-ups. Final point I wanted to mention was tries scored. The defence is a negative, I'm coming on to that, but in terms of their attack, England scored 13 tries in this Six Nations. In 2022, they scored 8. And they had a pretty limp attack. They didn't look particularly good. I still think England's attack has a long way to go, particularly if you look at the game against France and the game against Ireland. You didn't really have much faith that England were going to be able to break those defensive down and cut through them and make line breaks. In terms of line breaks, they weren't great, but they have been able to score more tries, which to me is clearly they're putting building blocks in place, they are improving, and hopefully they can continue to kick on. So call me mad if you want in the comments. For me, those are the positives, or the four main positives for England from this Six Nations. But we've got to get on to the negatives. Unfortunately, there are plenty of them. And as I kind of mentioned already at the top, progression. I think overall, England fans are going to be pretty disappointed with the progression under Steve Borthwick. And I don't think it's Borthwick's fault, but I think if you pose the question, have we seen much progression from England? I mentioned a few things above, but in terms of overall, in terms of still losing 3 of their 5 games, the answer is no. The caveat to this is I think they will get better. Think about how badly the RFU kind of botched getting Borthwick in the first place. They got rid of Eddie Jones. They then had to negotiate with Leicester. He managed to bring Kevin Sinfield with him, but he hadn't been able to establish the full coaching team that he wanted to. He didn't have much time with the players training beforehand. And maybe we do just need to bear that in mind when we're being critical of this England team. I think when it comes to the World Cup, when it comes to having 3 months build up or whatever it is, having the coaching setup that Borthwick wants in there, England will get better. I don't think they're going to pull up any trees right away. I don't think they really have a chance of winning the World Cup. But I think they will improve, and I think they will be better when it comes to the World Cup. So hopefully that progression does come. Number 2, and a big, big negative this one, is turnovers. So as I said already, discipline is actually good for England, which almost makes this statistic even more frustrating. England conceded 71 turnovers this Six Nations. So they're just coughing the ball up, really. They're not necessarily conceding as many penalties as they have done previously, but their handling errors are there. They're giving possession back. They're being punished on turnover as well. Look at France and Ireland, the best teams in the competition. They are ruthless, I think, when it comes to punishing teams off turnover balls. Scotland also can do it very, very well. England, part of those turnovers were 22 knock-ons. For context, Ireland had the next most knock-ons, which was on 14. I'd be quite intrigued, actually, for how many of them came in that England game when they were a little bit flustered in the first half. So England knocking the ball on, turning it over and getting punished. They have to be more accurate. They have to look after that ball better. Number 3 is kind of the depth of the squad and what is England's best squad. Again, let me pose a question to all of you. What's England's best team? Because I guarantee every single one of us that watch this video could put a 15-man list together, and there'd be a couple of names in there that I think most of us would say, but I think there would be a huge amount of variation. Whereas again, if we want to look at the best teams at the moment, if we want to look at the 3 best teams in the Six Nations, in Scotland, France and Ireland, you might have a few differences, but the bulk of that team you're going to know. England, I still feel, are way off knowing what their best team is. And I think that's one of the biggest disappointments from this Six Nations. I mean, you could pick a number of different areas of the team. For me, I look at the front row, and I think we know what our best front row is, but I still look at the depth in that front row and have concerns over it, particularly at hooker. I look at number 8, and unfortunately, Alex Dombrandt had a bit of a tough time this Six Nations. I thought he was actually pretty good against Wales, but then he struggled in some of those other games, particularly some of the bigger games. Is Billy Vunipola the next cab off the rank? If he is, can he do 60, 70 minutes at international level? I'm not sure. Therefore, are you putting someone who normally or plays a lot of flanker to number 8? You put a Ludlam to number 8. What happens in that England back row? There are so many questions. And I think we could probably go through the rest of the team and you could speak about who's going to start at fly half, who's going to partner Ollie Lawrence at 13, who are the wingers? I think Steward's probably nailed on at fullback, but who are the wingers that are the best options for England going forward? We could go through that team and there are question marks over it, and that is a real concern when you're heading into a World Cup as your next tournament. Number 4 is defence, and this actually isn't about physicality for me. If we want to look at the stats, because I did go and check it, England made 51 dominant tackles in this Six Nations, which is more than France, Ireland and Scotland, the teams above them. So it's not about physicality, and having watched England live, I think that back row is industrious. I think they're hard-working. I think they look to smash people in the tackles. I think England are physical. The defence is... It's about more than that. Maybe it's partly to do with fitness. I think in the final 20 minutes of games, England have been punished, particularly by Scotland and by Ireland, and they were put under pressure by Italy as well. So is it a case of fitness? I mean, they've conceded 18 tries in this Six Nations, England. And also they missed the most tackles. They missed 145 tackles, which was the most in the Six Nations. That's 29 missed tackles a game. And I know Kevin Sinfield's come in, and he did a brilliant job at Leicester. He is a guy everyone admires. He's someone I believe, given time, will get England's defence in the right place. But those are pretty galling statistics, really, when you think traditionally defence is one of the easiest areas of the team to be able to fix. And it clearly hasn't gone that way. We need to see something. We desperately need to see England's defence get better. I know Borthwick said after the Scotland game that they were putting in a new defensive structure. I'll be really interested to know the nuts and bolts of what that actually entails. Like what are they changing and how difficult is it therefore to adjust to this new system? But that really has to change. And then the final point that I wanted to mention was Fortress Twickenham. Twickenham, traditionally a ground that was never an easy ground to go to. And I feel like that shine has been lost. And England have lost any sense of aura of being a team who are difficult to beat. I don't think anyone is intimidated to play England anymore, particularly not away from home, and even now not at Twickenham as well, which wasn't always the case. I always remember Warren Gatland after the World Cup pool game between England and Wales in 2015 being absolutely delighted. And one of the things he said is, this is not an easy place to come and get a result. I don't think anyone could say that anymore. I think those best teams in the world will play England at Twickenham any day of the week, whenever you like. I don't think they would be intimidated whatsoever. So that for me is another massive concern. That's going to take a while for England to get back, particularly because we've got the World Cup now, but it's something that I think Borthwick and those players, you have to make Twickenham an intimidating, a fortress, a tougher place to come. And that will only do with really correcting the other things we've spoken about in this video in terms of the defence, in terms of the accuracy and turnovers and all that sort of thing. That's my thoughts then on where England are after this Six Nations. I think there are positives there. I believe Steve Borthwick will come good. I think sometimes these things are cyclical, and England had their time at the top and now they've had to go back down to the bottom and try and build themselves back up. They can get there. They should have the resources to get there. I still think they should be able to find enough depth within the playing pool to get there as well, but it's going to take time. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about everything I've gone through in this video. Make sure you like the video as well if you feel it's worthwhile, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That is always hugely, hugely appreciated. And as always, to all of you, I'll see you in the next one.